What is up, and welcome to Cryptographics, everybody. Glad to see you all here. We got 27 people here already, and today we are going all the way down the rabbit hole. We're going as deep as we can go with the man, the myth, the legend. We got Walrus in the house. Walrus, man, thank you for joining me. How you doing?
Absolutely, brother. It's a pleasure, man. It's been too long. We've seen each other's stuff a little bit here and there. I hadn't had a chance to talk, man. So I'm really looking forward to it. Appreciate you bringing me on. All the gratitude, guys. Thanks for everyone showing up.
Yeah, absolutely. We've been kind of like I've been in a space and I had to leave just as you're coming in, and then I'm listening when I can't come in. We've always evaded. So this is perfect. Finally, we get our chance. So guys, before we go too far, quickly here, let's just see what's going on. We got a bunch of people in here. We got 34 of us already. We got BC, my man. Thank you for being in here. Shout out to you for joining the memberships. Top Gun Hexadian, you're going to enjoy this one. I'm telling you, man. This is going to be sick. We got Bar Nero up in here. Hex Ed. We got Salmon. We got Crypto Freedom always in here, always sharing so much support. MJ Money, another one. World on Win. I haven't seen you in here before. Welcome. This is going to be a good one. Stick around, man. We got JD Scorpio. We got Footsteps. Let's go. Oh, no, not that one.
Not the one.
BA, welcome. Welcome, though. Welcome, but no. Roof Dog. We got Trust the Code. Tolek. We got GRC up in here. Welcome, brother. How you doing, man? I didn't get a chance to see your stream with Funding Jim, but I hope it went great. I'm going to have to check that out. I bet you it was an amazing stream. We got Blinks. We got a ton of people in here already. Holy cow. We have 48 of us. Blue, J Scorpio, Dougie, Jameson, HH, Muggsy, my dog, Ariel, Beltre. Man, I'm just as excited as you guys are. Everyone's flooding in here for this conversation. So let's start to get right into it. So Walrus, how did you get from pre-crypto into crypto and then to where you are today with as much knowledge as you have?
Yeah, I just took the wrong left turn out of being young and rebellious and just stumbled into this thing, right? So
yeah.
So I think that's part of the reason that I've resonated so much in the community is I've sort of had, I think, like a star-studded version of what everyone else goes through. I've just kind of bumped into the right people.
Right.
So
right.
I got into Bitcoin like right before Ethereum, like 2014, 15, but none of the investor mind state, no one would have wanted to hear my crypto opinion then, I promise.
Right.
I just kind of bumped into it and I was like, so wait, there's money the government doesn't want you to have and you can buy stuff that's illegal with it. Oh, pull it. I'm in. This is awesome. Right.
Yeah.
So it was just the, the counterculture appeal and, it's really interesting. And then, I didn't really even do much with it. It was more of like just something neat, right? It just really triggered me a little bit. Where I really started to get involved was, several years later. It's when I found I've always been one that's very big on mentorship and finding great people. And I stumbled onto, Roger Ver and listened to those and some of the Blockstream guys discussing like Bitcoin versus Bitcoin Cash. And I like game theory stuff. Obviously, that's why we're here, right?
Yep.
And so, I was listening to these guys and then, Roger Ver bumps into RH and, that same approach you've heard from everyone. It's like, who's this dude? And why is he punking my guy? Right. So then it went all the way down the RH rabbit hole. And it was always just like from the sideline. I watched it like a sport. I was just always interested in these things. So I was cheering for RH far before I even moved into Hex. Like, it's one of those funny things looking back. I tell people, I was like, I'm going to have to pull up the text message at some point where I'm telling my friends like, hey, this is the guy, Hex is going to blow up. And it literally went on for like 6 months and it was right around, it was still sub a penny, but not too much below that, where I was like, maybe I ought to get in on this thing that I keep saying is going to go up and keeps going up. Right.
Yeah.
So, got into Hex, early before I was in the community, spent some time with a few other cryptos. I always liked Monero. I got a chance to like engage a little bit with Fluffy Pony, listen to those guys kind of debate Zcash on a few things back then. And it was the overlap of the hexagons and PulseChain that just absolutely was the hook that got me sealed in. Felt like this was something I could not be a part of. And that's what's kind of led me down the path to the, being the Walrus guy that's really been known in the community. And, man, it's just come from a lot of acceptance from the community, being very grateful and always being super respectful and always looking out for me in a lot of ways. And then along with, devs and a lot of great people that have helped educate me along the way. So I end up kind of being a good guy in the middle because I have the same questions. I bump my head on the same branches, but I'm close enough to a lot of these really, really intelligent cats that now a lot of times I have the answer, but I think they resonate because I don't have a computer science background. I'm not a legacy banker. I don't build, I'm not a guy who has Raspberry Pis and build this stuff. Like, I have the same questions everybody else does. So,
Right.
and I'm just right there in the middle and been super obsessed. And, this community is so engaging and so welcoming that I stayed. That's where I'm at.
Yeah. And it's cool though, because it's like, it's not like you had some pre-knowledge of crypto that, all of us normally can't access. You weren't in the computer science world, you weren't in the developing side necessarily, and you kind of like built your way up knowledge wise. And I mean, it's kind of reassuring for me and for I'm sure a lot of people listening, because it's like if you can go from ground zero to where you are, I mean, it's just learning, and it sounds like a process of going through and figuring out all these things in a natural way. And so, where did that lead you to? Like, what is your role? What are you doing? Like, what do you do with all the crypto knowledge? Do you have projects you're working on, or what do you do with all of it?
So it was one of those things that it came about very, very organically. And I'm not nearly as gifted as it might seem when I speak on here. I'm always good at finding answers, right? So
Right.
I'm always good at sorting through people, which is, what gravitated me toward RH. I have a lot of guys around me that help so much. There's tons of people in the chat, whether it's Papa B, Gamma, LV, Profex, all those guys goes down the list, along with the How To Pulse team. Our devs are fantastic. You guys already know my team's my team. I love those guys so much. So at first it was just wanting to be engaged with something that I knew I was going to have a lot of investment in. And I just kept finding things that resonated, and I would go down these things until I had enough knowledge that I was actually, helpful, and started spending more and more time. I started, I jumped in as an admin and helped out a lot there. And that tied me into a lot of the community where, now where, I'm very connected with like a lot of the guys at LL. Those guys are, a lot of personal friends of mine. And, I had done just enough to the community that everyone was, willing to kind of keep engaging. So, now I've been talking with like Hexaco and some of the guys with PulseLN. The How To Pulse guys, we do everything. We're running a validator. Our devs help with everything we can on the back end. We're building a project NFT on Pulse that's going to be, trying to bring more adoption, more value onto the chain. I've helped a lot with onboarding. I've kind of jumped in on stream. So I basically just kind of become the translator for what a lot of really, really intelligent people have done. And it's a combination of, wanting to kind of pump my own bags it's just one of those things. I just kind of keep finding something else to do, whether it's onboarding. We're doing a lot with Xbot. We're doing a ton of work trying to protect people with compromised wallets and reaching out to it seems like the people who you want to be stolen from the least are the ones you're getting stolen from the most.
Right.
My father, he was military. I've done a lot of boxing, mixed martial arts things. A lot of my family are like lawyers. That we've done all kinds of things. So they're just very much people who'd like to right wrongs. And I just kind of found that role a little bit here, where there was sort of a need for some education that I find very gratifying. I like communicating with people. I like being engaged. And then, there just kept being another fire to fight. So we just keep growing. We're building projects. We're helping on code. We're onboarding. We do a lot of outbound messaging and marketing. We're the ones who ran the Twitter storm. We got over 650,000 impressions in about 6 hours with that. So
wow.
Cheers to the community.
No kidding.
Cheers to all the people who contributed a lot of, content on that. A lot of people did great stuff. Inviting freedom, a few of the common people in the spaces, Jim Rat's in those a lot. They did a lot of shilling, reminding people. They even joked, they're like, hey, if you want to have the mic, you better have already done the retreats. Like, if you were not pushing the Twitter storm, you're not talking today. So we're just kind of, it's one of those things. I just kind of, every time there's a need, if it's something I can fulfill the void, I've been trying to do that.
Well, and you've been doing it really well. Like, listening to you in spaces, like it's funny because you can tell everyone, like when you're in there, there's a few other people that are the same thing, but when you're in a lot of these spaces, it's really cool because no one else wants to talk, or like everyone asks questions. It's really interesting. No one's saying like, no, I disagree. It's like everyone's asking. That speaks a lot to what people think of you and the way you speak and how good you are at articulating yourself as well. So kudos, and you're an asset to the community. So thank you for all the work you're doing, because you sound like you're ridiculously busy and you're still managing it, finding time to come on here and chat and still manage all the other projects you're working on.
The community is so receiving and so grateful. I get beautiful messages written all the time. just people that are, have went in heavier. They feel better about their bags. They panicked a little bit while we're waiting. They feel, just more encumbered. They just feel closeness. I've been invited to events, just community guys. I promise I hear the gratitude. My position is one of service, guys. I love y'all. I really, really do. I get a ton of love all the time. And so it definitely doesn't go unheard. I really appreciate it very, very much.
Well, it's well deserved. It's very, very well deserved for sure. But on that note, we got a rabbit hole to dive down. And I would love for us to start going that direction. So real quick here, guys, hit them likes, like Crypto Journeyman says, and get ready because we're going way down the rabbit hole. So the way I think I'd like to start this off is what's the biggest, what you think if we talk about game theory here and going into Pulse Chain, what is the biggest question that you get asked as far as the whole Pulse Chain mainnet launch? Like, even let's start pre-fork. What is the biggest question you get asked that you have to typically, change people's minds on?
So a lot of it really comes down to order of operations, and there's a few things that they quickly change depending on your actual goal. So, we start at the wide end of the funnel. I want to be rich. Okay, cool. Getting crypto, right? All right. Well, okay, we got there, right? So you hear a lot of like contrasting opinions, and it's really people are talking around each other, not to each other. So when it comes to, the process on the pre-fork, what are you doing, right? If you loaded your bags up, you're set. Well, light up one of these, hang out. You're like, we're happy to have you, right? So it gets to what's your time frame? Are you trying to quickly move into a project? Are you trying to, again, a lot of it comes down to the copies. Are you trying to hold these things for long-term value? Are you trying to figure out how to optimize in that ratio swapping, which I know why we say ratio swapping, because that's what we're saying, but just for that clarity, alt swaps are ratio swaps. So that's just how liquidity pools work. And a big thing that I've really been trying to do is just, back, things would have been like magic, right? Things were magic and miracles before we had explanations. And I think now there's this like, oh, well, that's a ratio swap. And it's like it's just, now it's a different thing, right? Or, oh, well, there's going to be bots that do that. Like, do you guys know what the bot's doing? We start to kind of plug in these words that we don't really understand, trying to get a hole in this picture. And a lot of times, if we just work through things one at a time, it's still a lot, but people can get a better grasp of whatever their strategy is. So a lot of time it's just, bringing it from wide view into what we're actually trying to achieve. And then a lot of it comes down to, this ratio swap bridge mechanic and what assets to hold. Those are, I think, where people get the most turned off there.
Right. So there's two things that I think that would be a great place to start. One is, let's talk about like the harvesting and the AMM bot. And then another one, let's talk about, what's going to happen afterwards, likely with the pools and how those are going to be set up. So when the harvester bot is buying up these PRC 20s, where do they end up? Do they end up in pools? Like what exactly happens to those PRC 20s once they're harvested?
Sure. So I'll give a quick overview of the AMM bot, because again, it's one of those things that I think most of us have a good understanding, but whenever we don't understand the mechanic, we just sort of say like, oh, the fixer bot does that, or like it'll be arbed. Like, what does that mean? Like, do we actually understand those things? So what the AMM fixer bot does, one, AMM means automatic market maker. So it's talking about these Uniswap, these DEXs, right? Those are referred to as automatic market makers. The fixer bot is going to go through and run a script that recorrects the ratio in those pools, and ratio is price. So what happens is all these pools that had ETH are now wildly priced incorrectly because of the supply difference in Pulse. It's about 1.2 million times more, right? So where there's one ETH in a pool, there should be roughly 1.2 million Pulse.
Right.
So this AMM fixer bot mints a portion of Pulse, and then it goes through and literally just buys these like an ordinary person would. So there's one ETH, so now there needs to be 1.2 million Pulse. So it literally just keeps adding Pulse to the ratio, buying up the PRCs until that ratio is corrected again. So the bot is going to take this Pulse, basically buy all the PRCs on market till that ratio is corrected in Uniswap and some in Uniswap v3. And then it's going to take so now it has all these PRCs, right? It's holding the Hex, it's holding the Link and the SHIB and the Uni and all these things. And now it's going to take those, put those into PulseX, our DEX, our AMM, and now at that corrected ratio. So what you'll have is the pools that are left will be much smaller because most of it's been harvested, but they're corrected in that ratio. And now PulseX is going to have all this liquidity, and it's going to be corrected at the ratio. So that kind of gets the scoreboard corrected as the game starts. And that's what the fixture bot's going to do. So it makes sure that PulseX is very liquid, and it corrects all these pricing imbalances that we've done by the supply chain.
Right. So is there going to be, because when the PRCs get bought up, so if I'm hearing correctly, all of the ratios that are previously in any other liquidity pool in another DEX that is not PulseX, those ratios will be maintained when the harvester bot brings the PRCs and places them in the PulseX DEX. I'm hearing that correctly?
Correct.
Okay. So then when it comes to the other exchanges, is there an opportunity to get Pulse at a cheaper rate because the other tokens are being bought up? What's happening in those DEXs?
So in those other DEXs, anything that the AMM fixer bot touches, so V2 and V3, they're going to be corrected because it harvests until that ratio is corrected. So you can't actually buy something to zero. So those will have corrected ratios as well.
Right.
Where this arbitrage event is, and arbitrage is when someone interacts with a pool where there's a pricing inefficiency somewhere else. So where a lot of people may have seen this is, especially, a few years ago, if they pulled up the Bitcoin price, it was, well, where'd you pull it up? Because that price is different.
Right.
Well, why is the price different? Well, because they're looking at two different pools, right? So those pools stay close together because let's say that in the cryptographics pool, Bitcoin is 50 grand, but in the Walrus pool, it's 30 grand. Well, then I'm going to go buy the 30 grand Bitcoin and I'm going to sell it to the cryptographics, and I'm going to take that difference, right? And that's what that arbitrage is. So arbitrage is taking those inefficiencies and, someone's buying and selling in there until those get corrected, because now there's not an arb opportunity. So that's where you're going to see those things. It's when these other pools that usually have those arbitrage events that may happen 1, 2, 3, 4, 5% is plenty for an arb bot to go in there and make some money. And usually there's all these other mechanics, right? So there's like redemption on USDC. There's all these things that sort of keep the ecosystem running the way we're used to seeing it. They won't function on the new chain, at least not immediately. So where you're going to see these things move is, even though the Uniswap V2 pools are corrected, it doesn't mean that they're going to keep up with what we see in PulseX. So let's just say the ratio of these things, just for easy math, is 10 Pulse to 1 of this other thing. Well, if everyone starts buying that thing up and say that ratio goes to 20 to 1, well, if the ratio in Uniswap is lagging behind, let's say it's 12 to 1 there, then people are going to take advantage of that and buy and sell across, and that's where you'll see these arb events. So it's these pools that don't have the characteristics that would have kept them balanced before, and there's going to be less players, right? So on Ethereum, there's millions of wallets. These people do this all the time. It's been established for 7 years. People have this game figured out, right? Well, now on Pulse, there's going to be a lot less players. There's all these, nothing's ever launched with this amount of liquidity. So those games are going to be more pronounced, more opportunities, more going on.
Right. So then in that makes perfect sense. And thank you for clarifying. I've had some questions about how that was going to play out. So now that we know the bed is made as far as all the pools are going to end up in PulseX at the proper ratios, I think there's the big 3 questions, or the one of the big questions is, because we're all within this ecosystem that is basically built on Hex for the most part. What's going to happen? Because you said something in the Twitter space not long ago, or I think it was actually a comment on Twitter, that I asked a question back to you, and your question or your statement was pre-bridge Hex was, or correct me if I'm wrong here, but it was to do with Hex not being a great pre-bridge token to hold. And I would love for you to clarify what you meant there so we can go in on that.
Sure. So again, this sort of like what to hold with your dry powder, right? So it depends on what you're trying to do, right? So the longer your time frame is, the more, especially most of us are hexicans, right? So if you said, hey, what token do I want to hold for 6 months, a year, 2 years? Hex, right? Hex or one of the, PulseX, obviously, right? So when it comes to what to hold in the fork, if you said, hey, I just want to know what copies to hold forever, that's Hex, right? Or whatever ERC20 that you're personally in love with, right?
Totally. Yep.
If you're saying, what should I hold from the fork? Because I'm going to, basically, what am I going to denominate my dry powder in? Because I'm going to hammer that into Pulse or PulseX. Well, Hex isn't a very good token for that. One, everyone else has that same idea, right? So that pool is going to be likely very volatile. Also, Hex is not paired very heavily with Ethereum. So back to our AMM fixer bot, it only corrects ETH pool, right? If you have USDC in Hex, the fixer bot can't move that, right? Because if I put in USDC, then there's a bunch of hex. But if I pull out the hex and add USDC, so I can't drain that pool the way I can with Pulse. So if you have essentially stable coin to ERC20 or any kind of ERC, maybe like Hedron Hex or like Hedron Maxi, any kind of pool like that where it's non-ETH, those can't be harvested. You can't remove both sides, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Hex, because it's primarily paired with PUSDC, that pool doesn't move.
Mm-hmm.
So Hex already has low liquidity, and the majority of that liquidity won't move. So if we have players who are holding PUSDC and say trying to buy PHEX or sell PHEX into PUSDC on Uniswap V2 and then go interact, sure, there's some higher end game stuff. We can talk about that in a second, but specifically with Hex, it has thin liquidity in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
Hexicans are more likely to pull liquidity closer to the fork.
Right.
And its liquidity with ETH is extremely small. So that's all that's going to be in PulseX. So if you have the most held likely to be traded asset in a pool that is already going to be small in the place that most people are like to swap it, it's going to be volatile.
Mm-hmm.
And for most people, when you're looking at the kind of upside that we see in these assets, what all of us are even predicting, even a conservative point, I'm not looking for a few percentage points.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking to maintain principle because I want my 500x, my 100x, my 10,000x later. So I'm, again, especially for I think most players, they don't care about 10% or 8% or 6%. I want to maintain my principle and I want to hold a lot of these things. I'm going to let the price appreciation do the rest. So if your goal is to hold something that you're going to interact with very, very quickly on the other side, Hex does not make sense for that. It could play it well, but it could not. And if you're asking for help, you probably don't have quite the understanding that you'd like to operate in something that volatile, that early, without dollar values. You're playing a complicated game there.
Totally. That makes a lot of sense. So there's two things coming up. One so pre-bridge is one way of looking at what's going to happen with Hex for the pre-bridge ratio trading, right? Or for the non-priced trading, let's say. Is post-bridge still something that is Hex to hold? Let's say you wanted to trade post-bridge. It's more of an immediate strategy to use Hex after the bridge. Does that change the way you view Hex as far as something to hold your dry powder into?
Yeah, absolutely it does. So again, when we talk about holding Hex, we're not talking about holding Hex long-term because we think PX is the play and we're going to stake, right? We're talking about what are we denominating dry powder in? Just another clarifying for everyone listening, right? So if you, we could see that pool, again, that pool's volatile, right? So I didn't say that it was going to get nuked. I said it was going to be volatile, which means we just don't know, right? So if you're someone who says, look, I've said these things before, and sometimes with certain players, I'll tell them, I'm always going to be wrong, right? Even if you're looking at the most probable event, one, it's only probable. It doesn't mean that it's going to go that way.
Great point.
And even the most probable event doesn't mean it's actually likely to happen. You could have 10 possibilities with the most probable thing being 28%. So it's unlikely. It's still 1 out of 3, 1 out of 4. So we always want to bake in being wrong, right? So let's say that we want to denominate in Hex and we want to bake in the idea that this pool goes down, everyone jumps ship, they're trying to load on Pulse and PulseX, and it's very low value. So that is a possibility. So then you can say, all right, I can just say, okay, I missed my window here. The trade setup just didn't play out the way I wanted, but I love Hex. I'm going to take Hex. I'm going to stake it down the road. Cool. Then you can hold Hex during the fork and say that, okay, if it's not as valuable as I think, if that ratio is not where I want, I'm going to stake it till I make it. Or as you said, you can hold it and just take a little longer time frame and say, okay, I might move in that first 2 days if that ratio is strong. But all I'm going to do is I'm going to wait a little bit. So after the bridge is open, we're likely to see much more liquidity come in, people moving in wrapped USDC, moving in EHEX, and it's likely that liquidity with Hex is much, much thicker. Everyone has a lot of ideas, and I agree that we're going to see a lot of quick price reflection on PHEX. So the longer your time frame, the more sense it makes to hold Hex, and especially post bridge, say, 72 hours to a month. If you're someone who can, again, so a little bit goes into disposition, right? So if you're asking, like you had an onboard you brought in September, they bought the top, they watched it go down, they've been blowing your phone up all day, they think that you're the stupidest person ever, crypto was dumb, I should have bought Tesla stock, I hate it. don't, let's try not to give those people something that where they can see a huge red candle and bail out, right? But if you're someone who can be calm and you know that, and you're like, hey, worst case scenario here is I hold PHEX, cool. Then you can hold it, take your time, wait till you get some thickness in that liquidity, see if it does reach parity faster than some of us think, and then you can choose at that point, hey, this hex value is strong. Maybe I want to take profits. Maybe at this point you just change your mind. You're like, you know what, T-share is the greatest thing ever. I stake it.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can decide to start DCing A into Pulse or PulseX there.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I like the strategy. That makes a lot of sense for the shorter term to long term after the bridge. One thing that I saw Volt Gom here, he's asking, so what would you hold? Let's pre-bridge. Let's go back in there for a sec. What would you hold if you're trying to get Pulse or PulseX or one of the other two, knowing that Hex is likely to be highly volatile inside the bridge? What exactly are you looking at as something that is a better thing to hold? Is it an obscure coin? Is it something like SHIB or Chainlink, or what is it?
So again, when we're assuming that the question here is specifically, what should I denominate dry powder in? Mm-hmm. Because I'm going to be very aggressive pre-bridge, right?
Right.
So again, I say this all the time, and I like to bring up the same phrases because they're how I view these things. And like I said, it's not that I'm that smart, but I'm good at finding smart people, and I'm a good decision maker. Mm-hmm. So one of the lenses I look through with this is, no matter what you have going on, you're going to have problems. But if you're good at something, you can usually pick your problem. Mm-hmm. So in understanding this, there's a few choices. So you can hold stable, and we'll dig in that in just a second. Mm-hmm. If you hold a stable, then you've locked in principal, right? If you put in $1,000 in stables, you're going to have $1,000 to bridge in after the fork. If you hold an ERC20, you have price exposure now to whatever that project is, right?
Right.
So people can make the case, well, if I hold $1,000 of XYZ token, it's going to come over, and they think there's going to be this huge value difference in, and I disagree with that idea. But you do have price exposure, so you do have the upside, right? $1,000 could turn into $1,200, and then you're going to have the chance for the copies. So the first part is, do you or do you not want that price exposure? And even though Hex has been pretty strong, I think most people still view this as a bear market. There's a lot of just quirky things where you could have something unrelated where, Putin decides to go blow up something else, and the Fed says we're going to hike something, and you get a little bit of a dip there, and you could take a big hit on that principle. So,
right.
So the first part is, again, are you comfortable with the price exposure? And that sort of puts you on this path of, okay, that's a stable or another ERC20. If you go the stable route, again, you're going to lock in principal. You have no price exposure. You're set there. The two common stables, or I guess it's really three, USDT, USDC, which are essentially interchangeable in this discussion for the most part. USDC is better, it has more liquidity, right. Or DAI. So the two differences in those stables is essentially the admin key. So USDC has an admin key, which means that the people who hold that, which is Circle, can invalidate addresses. If they invalidate your address while you're holding it, it's zeroed out, essentially. Yep. It can't be traded. It's gone. Exactly.
Yep.
So that's a problem, right? The other is DAI. And DAI, it doesn't have admin keys, but it's backed by the MakerDAO protocol, which is what issues it, which is a collateral contract. That collateral contract runs off oracles in some fashion. It's a little complicated there, but essentially it's an oracle for common expression. And it's backed by ETH, USDC, and USDT. So,
and 70% of that liquid, 70% of those vaults are backed by ETH and USDC. The last I checked, somewhere around there, right? So that's crazy.
So the ETH is now Pulse, but it's not going to get corrected for ratio. So there went the vast majority of your collateral, and you still have the admin key exposure on the other assets. So essentially, the MakerDAO contract just breaks instantly. It's just not going to function.
Yep.
And so people have that, and then they say it's not going to have value. Well, that depends on what you're doing with it. So, and I'm going to go a little long-winded here because I want to kind of explain the mechanic along with answering the question.
Yeah, please do.
So if you actually go look at the USDC or DAI chart, we always say they're $1, but they actually fluctuate between about 98 cents to $1.02, right? Well, if they're worth $1, why does the price fluctuate? Do you know?
Oh, it's due to it's in liquidity pools, and the arbitrage is basically saving it from dropping lower. And I believe the USDT and USDC get basically traded out and redeemed, as far as I've seen.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So they maintain that value over time because of the redemption protocol,
Mm-hmm.
but their value doesn't come from that. Their value comes from whatever that liquidity pool says it is, which is why it has a variance there, right?
Right.
So even if that redemption stops in the case of USDC, or even if the Maker DAO protocol breaks, it doesn't change the value until it's removed out of those liquidity pools.
Right.
If it in the liquidity pools, if it still says it's essentially valued the same way, it won't be. We're not going to use a price in this context, but if 100 DAI equals 500 hex, it doesn't matter if the DAO protocol works. 100 DAI is worth 500 hex.
Just because it's in that
That's
pool.
what the liquidity pool says.
Yeah.
Correct. So even though there are risks and these things are not going to be something you'd want to hold long term, if we're specifically, again, talking about denominating them and being very aggressive in the swap, they're going to help. Again, you have the two risks there, where the risk that you get no value on your copies is obviously higher with USDC, but the value that you get sort of less than what you would assume is face value is higher with DAI. So you can kind of choose your risk profile there. The other thing is, I think people are overvaluing the copies as far as what their value is in that first couple of days. So I'm going to loosely use dollar values, and but I'm just trying to get to the ratio side. So
totally.
I did the math a second ago and just confirmed. So using like 27.60 for E, and I think I used like 18 cents for hex. So essentially the last kind of pricing we have. If you do the ratio, it's like 14,256 hex to 1 ETH. And then if you do the 1.2 million adjustment, it comes out to, again, I'm just trying to give context here, roughly about 85. So 1 hex will be worth 85 pulse. Okay. What would it have cost you to get 85 pulse during the sacrifice? So
oh my God,
3 zeros and a 1. So now you see where you're holding 18 cents, but if you just sort of think of it as acquiring pulse, you're going to get 0.0085 is what every hex would be valued at. So roughly 5%. So again, we're talking about these things specifically in this very short-term context. If you're talking about holding hex long-term, of course it's going to be great. But if you're talking about, again, this idea of dry powder, it's not going to acquire you as much pulse as you think. So if the copy is worth roughly sort of 5% of what we're kind of thinking in our head of that value as far as ETH value to what that would have bought at sacrifice, and again, USD value on Pulse, it's not that high. It's roughly 5%. So if the goal is rapidly to get into Pulse and PulseX, the copy side of that value is a much smaller part of this equation than the principal. So even if you think, hey, there's a risk of invalidation with USDC, or essentially you're just going to have just get wrecked liquidity pools with DAI, if you bring over that $1,000, it's a much bigger piece of the pie. So there's, again, you can play the price appreciation game. You can ride hex out if you think you're going to be bullish. Many people do. But it makes more sense than you think to just go ahead and take the stable, move into the value, and get what you get on the copy side, and not so much focus on the copies. Again, specifically if you're just going to push it into Pulse and PulseX. Talking about holding long term, of course, hex is going to be worth more than a penny. Of course, it's going to go up. Of course, Pulse is going to go up. But that's sort of that ratio. So the copies they're less of the overall sort of equation here than what the principle is. And so you could easily hold a coin that sounds like it will hold its value better, say like SHIB, for example. But if SHIB goes down 7, 8, 10%, like you're already in the loss, right? You held this other coin. So that's where I get into, if I bake in being wrong, I want to be wrong with hex, because I want the option to go, okay, I missed. I was wrong. Walrus is stupid. Everything fell apart. I'm just going to hold the hex, right?
Right.
Or that I held a stable and said, okay, I've still got my principle. I was wrong on this. It did get invalidated faster than I thought. DAI got just absolutely lambasted. I got a mediocre return there, but I still have my $1,000. So I think people are thinking that the copies are sort of half of the equation when they're not.
That's a lot to take in, but that's a very good way of looking at that. I don't think I've ever thought about it quite like that. So it's interesting. So when you talk about the stablecoins, and you're actually saying that stablecoins might be, if you're willing to go a little bit risky and to just kind of throw what you can at Pulse or PulseX, it sounds like DAI actually has some value potentially pre-bridge, is what you're saying. Is that correct?
They both do. I think I would actually lean the USDC route, as there's a lot more liquidity there. And while I do think the risk of invalidation is high, if you're already going to be aggressive, I think for a lot of onboards, people who maybe don't value Hex the same way that a lot of us do. So again, I'm trying not to necessarily let my biases affect my sort of decision making here. If you still have that long-term valuation on Hex, if you're willing to say, "Oop, yep, the liquidity pool got wrecked," and hold out, of course Hex makes sense. But if you're saying, "I've got $5,000, I want a bunch of Pulse, I want to get in early, I think this thing's going to moonshot all those things," the stables make a lot of sense there. You're going to make sure that your principal is maintained and safe and in a very volatile time frame and bear market. And I don't even think it's a risky play. I think that's the safe play. I think holding other ERC20s that have price exposure before the fork have more risk to the overall sort of what you end up with at the end of the day. And then again, the more patient you are, the more bullish, the more hexagon you are, the more you're about the hexagon. Then of course, take your time, hold Hex. Know that you may not get that early entry, that you may wait, and that you may end up keeping some of the stakes. But those are sort of the thought process, right? You can kind of pick your poison there. Do you want to take the least likely chance that you move in quickly to Pulse, but you sort of have this backdrop of safety with Hex where you can stake it later. It's going to be very valuable in the time frame, at least in my opinion. You can go a little riskier, in my opinion, of holding these other ERC20s. They're going to have thicker pools. You're going to get more value out of the copies. So maybe you just disagree with my perception of how I see the copies. Then you can go that route, and you're going to have price exposure. Price exposure is not always bad, right? Price exposure on Hex is fantastic. I held a bunch of Hex pre-sacrifice for Pulse and PulseX. That worked out pretty good, right? I got the good end of the price exposure. But again, it was a risk. I bought into the community's vibe on these things. So you can take that either way, right? And then there's a lot of concerns about how EHEX will be affected after the bridge, and you will sort of obfuscate yourself again from what could go on there. What could go on from using Hex pre-fork, but what goes on to the original side between then and the bridging. So the stables are a safer play than people think, as we spent a lot of time with this. And again, as I always bring up, guys, my ideas are not my ideas. They're a conglomeration of a lot of smart people out here. Do not think I'm the only one, that I'm sitting here that I've got some chalkboard that I'm just crafting this stuff looking like that meme from Always Sunny in Philadelphia. It's a conglomeration of smart guys, right? It's the devs, it's all the great people at Math working through these things. So that's sort of my general assertion. So you can kind of take your goals, your preferences, where you are risk averse versus where you're willing to accept it, and kind of dig through those options and see what best suits what you're actually trying to accomplish.
I like the way you explain that, though. It does make a lot of sense, and that's a very good counter to a lot of the ways that I've actually been explaining things on this channel, and that's really interesting to think about.
Me too. By the way. Like this is an evolution over, we've had 6-7 months now of working on these things, and it's evolved. It was when we thought it was like, hey, Hex is sitting here on this parabola, it's going to launch soon. Of course, why would you not ride that train, right?
Totally.
But now the secret in play is no longer a secret. It's been out here for months, and more and more people have come on. There's more and more money on the sidelines. Like, this goalpost is moving, right? So I don't really think anyone's particularly wrong, as much as maybe the worldview has just shifted in a lot of ways.
Right. I think that's a good point. I think it's a very good point. I have a question. I want to talk about the Circle Finance and the unsupporting, and there's section 8 of their legal terms in talking about the new blockchains and what it's going to imply for us, and then maybe the risks there. But first, I do want to just address the chat for a quick sec and just make sure everyone's doing well. So I saw,
any questions people have. Yeah, always. Yeah.
So one thing I'd like to just touch on here, Picky asked a good question. So thank you for this, Emilio Contreras Riveros. Can you explain a little more about the snapshot? Maybe help me out here, but I believe it's just maybe what the snapshot is versus the fork. And let's clarify exactly what's happening there. Is there like a time where it's like it happens and then it's announced later? Is that just the fork all one motion? Like, what's really going on with the snapshot? Sure.
So in general, a snapshot is the block that they're going to take data from, right? So like there was what was the meme coin that just dropped recently? I can't keep track of whatever that last one was.
Was it Pulse Dogecoin?
They were probably Pulse Doge.
Right.
Pulse Doge did a snapshot, right? So it was based on who had staked Hex, right?
Yes.
So and this is an easy one. So in that case, the snapshot was just literally the block they took. That's the snapshot, right? You take the picture, that's the snapshot, right?
Right.
So that block, however the Hex was in that block, is how they orient the drop. So if you ended stake right before that block, and then you had no stake text in the block, even if you restake the very next block, that snapshot shows you at a 0, right?
Oh, brutal.
So, right. Hopefully no one did that, right? That'd have been a really awkward, what would that be? 36 seconds there.
Oh, yeah.
But specifically for PulseChain, again, when people are saying like, when's the snapshot? What's the snapshot? What they're referring to is basically what's the last block that Pulse will update to. So literally a fork is the blocks are the same, the blocks are the same, the blocks are the same. The fork is literally when PulseChain and ETH have a different block. It's literally the fork in the road, right?
Right.
So the snapshot is very similar to the fork event. They get used interchangeably, but you don't necessarily have to fork to have a snapshot. So just want to make sure we're, getting people understand the vocab. It makes a lot of this stuff so much easier to process. So the snapshot is the last block that gets updated. So again, whatever, it's the last block that if you bought and it's in your wallet, that the snapshot is the last time it's going to affect what happens on PulseChain.
That's perfect. That makes a lot of sense. So just to clarify, so you got snapshot, the block, you're basically taking that picture, and then at a later date, it's implemented and you start from that picture essentially.
Correct. So the fork event basically happens right there. There's a process to starting up the new network. RH and all the devs and these guys will bring up a couple of their private nodes. They'll get connected. They'll probably bring on like 5 or 6 validators. The network will run on those 5. They will start to run all these sort of housekeeping transactions. The AMM fixer bot, they'll actually put the Pulse and PulseX in everyone's wallet.
Right.
They'll double check, they'll look through, make sure things look stable, and then they'll announce the RPC endpoint, the sort of it's live event. They'll give everyone the address, and now we're off to the races, and now we're actually chasing the rabbit.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. Real quick before we go, because I'd love to touch on that USDC question real quick. But guys, we have 222. This is the highest we've ever had on the stream for viewers. So incredible. Thank you all for being here. It's amazing. Please go quickly, smash that thumbs up button if you're enjoying it, smash that subscribe. And also, not now, but after the stream, go into the description, go and follow the man Walrus. He's always in spaces. You can find out more about his thoughts and what we're going over today by following him and going to the spaces. And we'll get to more of wherever else they can follow you as well later. But USDC, when it comes to the unsupporting and this probability that we're thinking about of these coins getting invalidated or frozen addresses or anything that can happen in this situation, my thoughts on this are, it almost to me, and I know you're going to be able to tell me where it makes sense, but it almost doesn't make sense to me that they would invalidate these coins potentially because they're not redeemable, for one, right? And in a way, I mean, people that might come across the bridge with USDC might have held that copy, and if they get invalidated, then their copies on the Ethereum chain that they just may have happened to be holding and not even realized, then they're going to be unhappy campers. So, and that could affect their business model, or not the business model, but the business that flows in, the amount of money that comes in, because they may get a bad rap for freezing these people's accounts. So what do you think of that whole concept, and what do you see playing out, and why?
So we can sort of look at some historical examples, but it's just never been done on this scale, right? So when we've looked at, so they've frozen like scammer addresses that had like stolen and taken advantage of different things. When it comes to whether or not they'll invalidate, the more I've thought about, the more it seems less unlikely. And also, they don't really have like a nuke all button. The way it's written, they can do some scripting, from what I understand. That level of the coding is a little over my head, but they do it per address, right? So they could go through there and nuke some big addresses, as you said, but and maybe they have a way to sort of do, to go in there and play with the way that admin key is written and kind of run like an all script or hit big addresses. I'm not sure what strategy they would use once they decided, hey, we want to invalidate all this nonsense. I think that takes time, and that they would at least want to sort of see how the first little bit plays out. So I think that there's a reasonable expectation that it is invalidated at some point. I don't think that it happens very early on. But again, there's not a lot of times where someone says, hey, I'm going to double your coins. So even a few percentage of risk on those things is a bigger deal than it sounds, right? So I want to give the clear information. And when I say it's not very likely, I don't think it'll happen that early. But people do want to understand that event is also a zeroing, right? That would nuke all the value there. So it's in my opinion, it's not very likely that it happens sort of in that pre-bridge when people would really want to use that copy in a very valuable way. But again, if it does happen, it's gone.
Right. So what I'm thinking here, I want to bring up, because there's
the last thing, just start to chime in there. So the last thing is that obviously they will not be redeemable. Where I think it could make sense to invalidate at some point is when they want to invalidate the old, if they decided to roll out an actual copy of USDC on PulseChain, they decide to adopt it. And then they're going to kind of have this thing like, I feel like at that point, they're going to be like, no, those aren't our USDC. Those are cloned copies of a different USDC, not the USDC we have here. So it's, again, I don't think any of these events are extremely likely because we just don't have good context. But if I was giving my best guess, and again, it doesn't mean that any of these are all that likely, I would think that we don't see invalidation in that pre-bridge time, that at some point in the future, they do decide to invalidate to sort of lock the clones and then reissue the contract and actually back it up and adopt PulseChain at some point. That would be my best guess.
That does make a lot of sense. And just real quick, because there's a couple people in the chat just saying that there will always invalidate it. So if you want to come to, I'm going to drop the link in here because we're not going to go through and read it, but this is section 8 of the legal terms for USDC. And you can read the wording for yourself to see how they're wording it, because it's not always, it's a very discretionary language. And it's not for sure, but like you said, there's a probability that it will happen at some point. So definitely go in here and read this for yourself so you can understand what we're talking about and their exact wording and why Walrus is saying what he's saying here. And on that note, real quick here, guys, again, we got 230 people in here. This is nuts. Let's go, Hexagon. Smash
I'm very
that
appreciative,
like button.
by the way, guys. Thanks so much.
Yeah, I can't. This is amazing. I hope you guys, if you guys are loving this stream, please smash the like button. Drop a comment or drop a 1 in the chat if you're enjoying the content so far. Thank you all for being here. And one question I had for you before that we weren't quite getting to, I'd like to pull it back to the Hex, PulseChain, PulseX category here for a second. I've been kind of playing with what's going to happen, and it's a combination of what will happen pre-bridge ratio, and then what will when Ethereum Hex comes across the bridge and gets paired with PulseChain Hex, or eHex pairs with PulseChain Hex. So my thoughts on this, and I know you're going to tell me how it really is, so I'm expecting to be wrong here, but the way I'm thinking is, okay, so we see the ratio between, let's say, PulseX and Hex, as well as PulseChain and Hex. Hex dives because people are trading it for Pulse and PulseX. So now my question is, when Ethereum Hex comes over and becomes eHex and pairs with PulseChain Hex, I'm thinking it makes the most sense to me that if someone decides to pair that 1-to-1, that's almost like a boosting effect instead of the only way I can word it is like a boosting effect on the price of Pulse and PulseX, because essentially, even though it seems like Hex is lowering in its value, it's actually kind of raising the value of Pulse and PulseX if the ratio is set to 1-to-1 when eHex to PulseChain Hex happens. So am I thinking about that right? Or am I completely out to lunch here?
So the biggest effect there will just be, it does indirectly, because anything that's paired gets pulled around, right? That's the Hart's Law, that all of us have really, been coached pretty well on by RH. Thanks so much, Stack. Glad to have it,
thank
brother.
you, Vertical Stack. You're amazing.
So when it comes to like this idea of pairing 1-to-1, you can only provide liquidity at whatever the ratio is, right? So the thicker that liquidity is, the more difficult it is to adjust that ratio, right? So if I put 1 billion eHex and 1 billion pHex, if you come in there and buy 10,000 Hex, the ratio barely moves, right? It's a drop in the bucket. So when it's paired over, the fact that those things they're at a 1-to-1 ratio means essentially their value is the same, right? So if I can give you an apple for an orange and an orange for a banana, then an apple and a banana are worth the same, right?
Right.
So what really controls that price is how thick that is, and then also what happens afterwards, right? So even if I come in there and I put out the ratio at 1-to-1 and provide liquidity, it doesn't stay there, right? If people come and trade, it's going to keep moving it around, right?
Right.
So it would take if the idea there is like the community wants these things to be bonded, you need a good amount of liquidity, and you'd almost kind of need some manicuring, a little bit of like almost arbing back and forth to try to keep that ratio close. If you want to use that as like, sort of use that as a bootstrapping mechanism to actually keep them together.
Okay.
Because otherwise people can trade out, right? So even if someone goes in there and keeps the ratio 1-to-1, if some big player takes 10 million and swipes one side, well, then the ratio moves, right? And it's not doing quite what you wanted. And you would need people to come in and keep adding back to the other side to try to get it back to 1-to-1, right? So it takes some manicuring from there. It's not like you can just kind of pair these things and they just stay locked forever. It's an LP, so people can interact with it.
Right. Okay. So then once the bridge happens and once, well, actually, let's talk about liquidity for a second. I keep coming back to this. And what is, because you made a comment earlier in the stream talking about liquidity and how people may pull their liquidity pre-fork. So the thing that I'm trying to understand is, how likely is it that someone times things right for the liquidity, and like how many, what are the statistics? Like how much of who has the most holdings or the largest percentage of, is there someone that has like 20, 30, 40% of the liquidity in USDC Hex and Ethereum Hex? Or is it a bunch of smaller players that have participated? And like, I'm trying to figure out, how why they would pull it out before, even though they don't know the date. It's kind of a risk to them in a way, so what would make someone want to pull their liquidity other than, and how would they get it right? Like, how likely is that?
So the reason why they would pull it is because they don't want, in Hex, especially, like the majority of people would be Hex to USDC, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you hold the liquidity, then what you're going to end up with is that same pair of PUSDC and PHEX on the other side. What do you think people want more, PHEX or PUSDC?
Oh, of course, the obvious. Yeah.
Right. So if you're the one in that pool, what's likely is that people quickly want to get out of that pool. So I wouldn't, as a liquidity provider, I wouldn't want the exposure to PUSDC.
Right.
So I would remove liquidity because I don't want my liquidity locked in Uniswap V2 or V3. And I don't want the exposure to the PUSDC on the other side, because I'm assuming that everyone's going to want to get rid of all of these stables and get into the valuable things. So that's not a pool I'd want to participate in. You're likely to see impermanent loss. And anytime that you're providing an LP and one of those things, for whatever context, becomes much more valuable than the other, you're going to end up with the not valuable one, because that ratio is going to move against you. That's impermanent loss in these things, right? So if you kind of, I think an easier example is, imagine that you were providing liquidity in two stables and one breaks, you're going to end up with the broken one. So now we're going to looking at Hex and PUSDC, one that people think is going to be the most valuable ERC20 period on the network. Another one that people aren't sure that works.
Right.
That pool is going to get moved quickly.
Yep. I definitely agree with that. And that makes a lot of sense. Alan Fizime, thank you, my man, for the $5. Alan says, what might happen to obscure ERC20 tokens on PLS? Might there be an opportunity to obtain on PLS bridge over to ETH where they have greater value?
So they're different tokens, right? So if you bridge a Pulse version back over to Ethereum, it doesn't become the E version. It's a wrapped version of what's on Pulse, right? So a wrapped token is just a poker chip that says that name on the right. So if I have a whole wrapped BTC, it's just an ERC20. It has zero in common with Bitcoin. It doesn't, all it is it's a poker chip that says a Bitcoin. The only reason it's worth the Bitcoin price is because there's a bridge where I can take it, burn that wrapped token, and get the Bitcoin on the other side. That's all that does, right? So if you take, say, PHEX, right? If you take a PHEX and it's worth, we'll call it 10 cents just for a number, and you wrap it over and it comes to Ethereum, and Ethereum Hex is at, I don't know, 20 cents. It doesn't all of a sudden become an EHEX that's worth 20 cents. It becomes a poker chip that says Hex on Pulse on it, and it's worth whatever I can cash it out for on the other side.
Right. Right. Yeah. It's more like a shadow. It's more like a shadow than anything else of what is locked in the bridge. Is that correct?
Correct. Correct. And then I wanted to answer something, Bob. He's a smart cat too. I like this guy. He said that the AMM bot would wreck it before it happens. I'm assuming he's talking about that PUSDC pool. If he is, the AMM bot doesn't affect the PUSDC PX pool. You can't move it. It'll still be in V2.
Right. So, okay, that's okay. Question on that. So we have V3 is unable to be touched right now by the AMM, right?
They are going to.
Okay.
I'm imagining that they just won't get to every pair. It's a little more difficult because those pools are asymmetrical.
Right.
So they'll remove a lot of it. If I'm speculating, they haven't done this publicly, I would imagine that they might miss a few more pairs in V3, and that they'll sort of set the parameters a little tighter than they might. So I would imagine that they kind of get the bulk of what's in V3, but that V2 will be pretty well lined out, except for obviously, again, those I say ERC20 to ERC20. They're all ERC20s. Any pool that doesn't have wrapped ETH with it.
Right. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I want to get into V3 for a second, but real quick, Navin Gautam, thank you for the question here, and shout out to you for being a member. What would be the ideal ratio between EHEX and PLS? Is it just going to be based on, or I don't have any PLS and want to acquire some? Any advice, please? It's a fair question. We kind of went over that a little bit, but is there, and actually this is maybe another way we could tack onto this too. How does someone calculate a ratio that they're willing to know as what they will trade at ahead of time? Is there a way to figure out, like, I know that if the price of, like, my buying opportunity is within this window of, let's say, 250 pulse per hex to 500 pulse per hex, or how does someone figure that out?
So once you actually have the chance to move EHEX, the bridge will be open, and you'll actually have a dollar value there, and it'll be much easier. You won't really have to do a ratio game there. It's still a ratio game, but you'll actually have a dollar value.
Right.
So, if Pulse is a penny and EHEX is 20 cents, well, 20 to 1, right? There's your ratio.
Yep.
So whenever you get to EHEX or these other things, you'll actually have that ratio will be in front of you, right? It'll just be US dollar values.
Of course.
So if anything more accurate than that, it's a trading game, right? I don't really make forward-looking price statements in general, but it's, how everything's more valuable, right? Yep. If you think EHEX is going to go to $1 in the next month, and you think Pulse is going to stay static, well, I would need a lot of Pulse, right? So, yep. It is a bit of a trading game. I think that in general, if you have a long time frame, it's hard to bet against Hex in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. But Pulse and PulseX are going to be special. So I know that doesn't really help answer the question too much, other than at that point you'd already have a US dollar value. Mm-hmm. But you're just going to have to look forward and look at these prices and what you'll think they're going to do. And it gets a little more nuanced. If you're going to kind of set it and forget it, I'd probably just kind of take a portfolio balance. Say, all right, I want 20% here, 30, 20, cool, mm-hmm. pull it. If you're the more sophisticated you are, the more you can look at time windows, right? So mm-hmm. if you think that Pulse is going to have this big, heavy ramp in the beginning, you can sort of capture that curve and start sort of DCAing your gains back into Hex, right? So, mm-hmm. Let's say you put in 50 grand, right? You got a decent bonus and you think you catch a 10X. So now you're talking about like 600 grand. Well, mm-hmm. most of us have very little need to pull out 600 grand at one point. Oh, so yeah. If you don't really need access to it, the more funds I have, the more I'm just looking for yield off it, right? So right. I think that a lot of people, it depends on skill level, tolerance, how much you view these things. I think that you'll see people that want to take advantage of the newness of the chain, the shiny object. They want to sort of get that early part of the curve where there's a lot of price appreciation on Pulse and PulseX. And then I'll think you'll see people start to sort of DCA back into the one that brought us all to the dance and take advantage of the yield, because once you have the big car, the pretty house, you got baby mom with a diamond ring, mm-hmm. what are you gonna do with 600 grand, right? Yep. Keep 100K liquid, take 500 and start adding to the ladder because you want the yield on it. If I'm not going to spend it right now, I want it working for me.
Oh, exactly. Might as well build your assets and grow them, so that way when you do want, like, that 1% that you can extract through whatever passive income or however many percent you can get, that's growing exponentially. So now instead of 1% being 10 grand, 1% becomes slowly 100,000. Then maybe someday it's $1 million, and your assets are worth so much more. And I think to cap it off though, because what the question was really saying was what is the ideal ratio between Hex and PLS? And it sounds there is no real ideal ratio. There's no way to know, is there? It's all speculation and kind of taking a stab at it. And you're understanding that it's highly risky, and you're never going to know what the best ratio is. You're going to take a stab and get lucky at best. Is that what I'm hearing?
Right. At one point, Bitcoin was too expensive at 10 grand. Now it's 38, right? So yep. Essentially asking the ratio is really just which of these assets. I'm making a bet on which asset will outperform the other over a length of time. So depends on your length of time, what yield you end up getting. The longer you go on the horizon, the more you have to factor in the yield on Hex. So again, yeah, it really is just a price. It's essentially, that question really boils down to a price prediction.
Right. Okay. That's exactly what I was expecting you to say. Right. So Salman, Anjum, thank you so much for the $5. We did touch on this, but real quick, I guess we can just cap this off again. So it's much better to choose USDC over DAI for the fork and pre-bridge, correct?
If you're going to be aggressive, in my opinion, it is. There's more liquidity. There's a larger chance that you take a zero on the copies.
Right.
But I think there's a larger chance that you get sort of closer to face value on USDC. There's more
Right.
liquidity. It doesn't, yeah, it just has more liquidity. So it'll be able to absorb more people interacting with the pool.
And again, key thing to note with what you said is if you're being aggressive. This is not a conservative play. Like, you know what you're doing, and you are being aggressive as hell about this whole thing. So if
This
you're,
is
it's not
about
for the
I have
faint of
dry
heart.
powder and I'm getting it into
Yeah.
PulseX or PHEX very quickly.
Yep. Exactly. We got another super chat, man. Thank you guys so much. This is crazy. Tom Cornblue or Cornblue. What about Terra USD? This is a good question, and I've thought about it a little bit, but I never actually brought it up on streamer or asked anybody about it. Terra is a algorithmic stablecoin. So how would something like that? Well, Terra USD is on the Terra Luna chain, so that wouldn't, for one, be copied over. So
correct.
Right. So Terra, guys, is not going to be copied.
The answer is it functions like DAI, right? So there's a collateral contract and things behind it. It's algorithmic. Those things won't function. But again, the value when we're talking about, again, this denominating things in dry powder is about what's in the pools, right?
Right. Okay. So simply, yeah. So when it comes across the bridge, it'll have whatever value it has on the Terra Luna chain, essentially. But that's all it'll ever be good for as far as PulseChain is concerned.
Correct.
Right.
Oh,
okay.
I gotta get to this one real quick.
Oh yeah.
Uncle Brambles, happy 73rd. You're living through an incredible time. We appreciate you, brother. Get you 25 more strong ones, man. Hit the Centennial Club. Many more blessings, brother.
Oh man, that's amazing. Happy freaking birthday, Uncle Brambles. That's 73. That's a big number. That's pretty cool. Yeah, that's what did you say, Centurion Club, or which? I never heard that before.
Centurion. Yeah, 100 years.
27 more to you, my friend. And have an amazing day. Have an absolutely amazing day. So I think one of the things that everyone's really wondering here is, some kind of answer to both the how do I get more? Well, Pulse seems to be the big. I mean, you tell me what you think here, but it sounds like Pulse is the thing that most people are wanting to get because they missed the sacrifice. So, in your opinion, what is the one best way or a handful of the best outlooks and strategies to, let's go with the pre-bridge. Maybe let's do two, like the best two strategies for pre-bridge and the best two strategies for post-bridge for acquiring PLS token.
So pre-bridge, it would be the same questions about like what to hold with dry powder, right? You can take those routes. Again, we kind of discussed those. Post-bridge, it's one of the things, just buy it, right? It's an asset like everything else. I almost don't like saying this because I don't want to condition people to it. I don't think that Pulse will dip the way people think it will dip. Of course it will. Of course, everything dips, right? Every chart goes up and down. But when people talk about a dip, I think they really mean like close to a full retracement. I don't think you're going to see that in Pulse.
I agree.
But I say that as a way to not let the price run away from you when it comes to a DCA strategy. I don't mean to tell you that you guys are not going to see blood in the streets. You're not going to see red candles. I promise you are going to see red candles. And so I don't say that to tell people, oh, it's not going to dip. It's going to 100x right away. I say that in the context of just DCAing. I don't think you're going to get that thing where it dips back to near sacrifice price. We don't have the free claim on this is essentially nothing. If you take every single pulse that gets dropped to ETH holders, if you sacrifice more than about $11,300, you have more pulse than what will be dropped to the entire ETH set.
Right.
All of it. So it's not very much. And if anyone's worried about them guys dumping, I'll buy more the first day. So I'll eat the whole. If they all just drop on us, don't worry, I got that covered. Right? It's not that much. So you don't have a lot of free claim. You don't have this like VC level that got in different than everyone. C5 and Overwatch, they have big bags, but they put their pants on with two legs. They went into the same mechanics we did. Yeah, they have a big bonus, but I don't see those guys looking at trying to dump on everyone's head here for a 2, 3, 4, 5x. So the things that typically give you that big S curve at the beginning of a project aren't as prevalent. Of course, things are going to dip. Of course, people are taking profits. People have been flooded out. They've waited so long that they're sitting on their fourth credit card because they put too much money in. They finance the house, all these things, right?
Yeah, totally.
Of course, it's going to dip. Of course, people are going to take profits. I specifically mean to bring it up that I wouldn't just be like holding all this price thinking that you're going to get this huge retrace. I would still start DCAing, not aggressively, but just I would be DCAing more on time rather than trying to sit here and pick up bottoms.
Right, right. And I think, I'm gonna say my thoughts on just like what I'm playing around my head and see if it's like kind of what you're thinking is gonna happen as well. So what I'm kind of predicting in my head is, with the ratio trading, the amount of people that may be very aggressive pre-bridge and push the price of, or the ratio in the initial stages of PLS the highest, or like reduced liquidity essentially. When that bridge comes over, do you think it's likely that the price of PLS launches because of that pre-bridge situation much higher than people are expecting, which could cause the initial dip if there's ever going to be a dip? Or do you think it's going to be something like the bridge happens, the buy orders start coming in, and then we see the dip, whether it's hours or days after the bridge launches? What do you think is going to happen?
So this is a little mind melting, but all the trading that goes on pre-bridge doesn't change the price of Pulse at all. Okay,
let's go into that. So where do we even start with that?
So again, it's one of those things that you're like all of a sudden those cogs in the brain start heating up.
Yeah.
Price comes from one place, right?
Right?
That's what we talked about with stables. So if the dollar value of Pulse comes from the liquidity pools where it's paired to USDC and ETH, then that's where the price is. It doesn't matter what the rest of these ratios are. It does matter in who has them and how much liquidity is to sort of interact with that pool. But as far as there's correlation and things like that, but the price is whatever those first liquidity pools set it at. If everyone dumped every single thing on Pulse and everyone moved into Pulse and all these ratios were very heavy slanted to Pulse, if the first couple liquidity pools put Pulse out at 1 cent, it's 1 cent.
Wow.
So it's interesting that it changes who has the Pulse. And I don't want to say like it doesn't affect price. Of course, these things there's a little more nuanced effects, but as far as the actual price, it doesn't matter. The price is whatever the liquidity pool says it is.
That's crazy. So basically pre-bridge doesn't have as much of an impact on Pulse as we're expecting it to have, is what you're saying.
It does if you want it, right? So it's one of those things that there's like this shuffling game to avoid certain tax implications, to get your hands on Pulse, because trying to have it sort of drain these other pools in a lot of ways. But again, the magic is the price comes from liquidity pools. Sometimes we like narrative, we like stories so much that we want to get to all these things, and it's like if you watch a football game, they're always like, man, you got to do this, you got to do this. Man, what it really comes down to basically is like, did you have Tom Brady? If you have the best quarterback in the game, he's such a huge percentage of that thing, right? So when it comes to this, there is a lot of nuance and narrative and this and that, but price is what the liquidity pool says it is, right?
That's crazy to think about. Yeah, it's definitely like mind bending and the gears start seizing up a little bit, but that's that's interesting. I'm gonna have to chew on that fully to wrap my head around that and fully process that. But I think a way we can go real quickly is question's gone. Hold on one sec. It was there. Oh, right. So when it comes to Pulse, let's say now you have Pulse, right? What are the best ways to, instead of ever having to sell your Pulse, how do you gain the system so that way? Or is delegating the best? Is liquidity pairing, or providing liquidity? What is the best way? And I'd love to know this for PulseX as well. Obviously, staking, the single side staking, are going to be really interesting. But for Pulse, what's the best way to maximize the use of your Pulse?
One, don't sell it. Let it do its job, right? Let number go up, right? So obviously delegation, take your free yield essentially, right? The delegation is also important because it's where you actually get to participate in consensus. So I always like to just touch on that because there's a lot of intrinsic value there, right? Like a lot of us, think our votes don't count. We're used to kind of complaining about Vitalik and miners. Well, here you at least have, again, maybe it's a small say, but you do have some say. Like we can measure the vote, right? You get to vote on there about who's running the network, and participating in consensus, I think, is just something that not a lot of people have got to do before, right? So I think there's some intrinsic value there. The return is not likely to be very large on it, especially early on, while the fees are so low and things like that. They will go up in the future. And then obviously everyone knows, I love the liquid loans guys. That protocol makes a ton of sense. Being able to use collateralized programs like that to let these things do what they're supposed to do is very valuable. So another kind of funny thing to wrap your head around, my actual need for Pulse, like how much do I have to keep doing what I'm doing, is very, very small, right? So I don't really need Pulse I need exposure to Pulse's price. That's the magic, right? So if you do things, so for example, like a really big one is the haunted strategy. People have heard him talk. He's one of my buddies. I talked to him earlier today. Yeah, as a matter of fact, where's the likes, guys?
Are we really at 30?
Yeah, try to get cryptographic some love, man. This guy does a lot for the community. He's a very smart guy. I'm lucky to be here. So yeah, let's show him some love. So just as an example, if you use the haunted strategy and basically keep like a collateral level of like 1,000%, you could have never sold your bag and kept your full price exposure. And if you take it from the hex chart from like day like 28, essentially when it had a full market and everything was there, you could keep 1,000% collateral and it would have never liquidated, not once on the whole chart any day.
Yeah.
So if you that's a strategy to take your time with, right? That's a very powerful tool. Many people use these things. And what's that? It's the I'm trying to remember how that it's the food of the wise man, but the liquor of the fool, right?
Oh, yeah.
If you're using debt constructively to avoid certain implications to maximize price exposure, collateralized debt, and the LL platform works great. But if you're sitting on a Discover card with 26%, that's not the right kind of debt. That's two different monkeys, right? So it's one of those things. Sun Tzu did say that. That's a true quote. I'm glad he brought that up.
If you've read The Art of War, this is in the book. I swear.
Yeah, page 86.
Exactly.
So it's good stuff. So there's a lot of these other tools that you can use, collateralized programs, a lot like that. But again, they are things to take advantage.
Yep. And I do like the idea of liquid loans. I have had a hell of a time, getting time to really look into it. I think there's some really, really good implications for what it is. I am actually a little preview next week sometime, or either next week or the week after, I'll be going on with Jesse and on his channel and speaking with him about liquid loans and, hopefully getting up to date with everything. But I don't really have too much of an insight, to be honest, on liquid loans. And I'm still waiting so I can actually I'm very neutral on it. I don't have a good or bad opinion. I want to learn at this point. So hopefully in the next couple weeks I'll learn more.
Yeah, for sure. And usually when I speak, usually when I speak about a lot of the protocols, I'm usually not talking about the token, because I'm not a chart guy. I don't make price predictions. I'm horrible at that stuff. I'm one of those where I buy things I think are valuable. I play games that I think are valuable.
Right.
So usually whenever I'm speaking about something like PulseLN or Hurricash or liquid loans and those things, I do like those projects a lot. I think those devs are good guys. I think they're all building things of value. Internet Money, KG, all those boys too. Want to make sure I give them a shout. I'm usually speaking about the protocol and how it's useful, not really their tokens and if it's a good play. I'm not a financial advisor. Don't trust my price predictions. I don't make any anyway, but they're awful. I'm looking at things that make value, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think, like, from what I have looked on with liquid loans, I think that there is a way to, I mean, personally, I think that for me, what makes the most sense for some of the liquid loans is to not utilize the protocol as a loan, somewhere to take money out as a loan. I think it's more of a way to, access more funds to then generate more income with a very high collateralization ratio. So you don't have to worry about liquidations with at least 1,000% collateral, 1,100% collateral, and then build your wealth in your asset portfolio using that protocol as well. But I'm really excited to learn more because at this point I know barely enough, and that's all I've got to say really on the liquid loans front. But guys, real quick, we've gone over. We haven't gone over yet. I'm realizing this now. So we talked about getting Pulse, but let's talk about PulseX right now. Are the strategies still the same for getting something like PulseX, even considering, when people sacrificed for Pulse Chain, they didn't know PulseX was going to come out. And then the people that found out about Pulse Chain sacrifice afterwards, they were like foaming at the mouth, being like, holy crap, I need to get it. How do I get in on this? Right. That's why people were sacrificing for months and months and months, almost up to the PulseX sacrifice day. And then we had 100,000 more wallets sacrificed for PulseX. And I don't know about you, but it seemed like the sentiment with the PulseX sacrifice was almost like it was that way to get tokens on the Pulse Chain network to trade for PLS. So before we talk about the strategy for PulseX, what do you think is going to happen ratio-wise or price-wise to PulseX initially in comparison to Pulse?
So that pool won't exist natively. That'll get created, right? So someone will get a chance to actually set that up.
Right.
Typically, if you don't know where something should be priced, you use thinner liquidity, right? So let's say that I think the price of PulseX should be a penny. I would just use penny round numbers, right?
Right, you're right.
Do I want to go put $100 million of USDC with it, right? Like, no, because I could be wrong, right? And then everyone's just going to eat into my liquidity, right? I overvalue that thing. So what I think, again, we're always talking about like probabilities, right? I think what's most likely is that liquidity is relatively thin. And again, it's going to be something that could be very volatile. If it was me, it's one of those things. If you need my opinion or any of my advice, I'm not touching it. There's no way I'm letting that stuff move. If the ratio gets really far apart, at some point I'm always a buyer, and so should everyone else to some degree, right? So if someone's willing, if that liquidity pool is willing to give me, I don't know, 20 PulseX per pulse, yeah, okay, because what that means is, right, that's a bet saying that if I don't do that, I think that Pulse will outperform PulseX 20-1. Plus whatever the yield difference is in the two, right? So, at some point I'm always a buyer, but anything that I think it would be realistically, I'm just not swapping these things. I don't want to take a chance on getting wrecked. I'm not trying to min max like the difference in 500 and 600x. No, just hold these things. Let them do what they're supposed to do. The same rant that I say every time anyone asks, you likely have the lowest cost basis for things that a huge group of people think have 5-digit X upside. What is the chances that you trade that with another currency that just launched with no US dollar value and you improve that position? I like to leave it right there. If you think you can outperform that, fine. Then you don't need my help. You're a very smart guy. I wish you the absolute best. But if you're anyone who's trying to play it safe, if you're so far down the wishing well that you're listening to Walrus on YouTube, guys, be safe. Don't get that principal get wrecked. I'm going to be cautious as well. Be safe. Tell your people to be safe. If you hold these things and you hold them for 18 months, I'm hard pressed to believe they're not going to be happy, but you can screw it up, right?
Yep. And I think what I'm hearing too, you're implying something interesting here. Because I think there's a lot of sentiment that Pulse is the token. A lot of people really, really, really want to get Pulse because they missed it. But I wonder how many people don't fully understand what's going on under the hood of PulseX, and why the way you're speaking is alluding to PulseX being something special as well, and why you're not wanting to get rid of it. So what do you see happening short term in, let's say, the first 6 months? Because the market's going to be the big player in dictating everything. But because of the power of what's going on under the hood with PulseX, how do you see PulseX competing price-wise with something like PulseChain? Or do you see it competing, or think it's going to be completely different? Do you think it's going to go down, up? Like, what are your thoughts?
So I think that's a really hard question to answer. So I like to ask the easier question, and it's, do I think PulseX can go up a bunch and give me a bunch of yield? And that answer is yes. So I'm not going to give you any of mine. So I think that's a better question to ask, right? So like a lot of times, I think I said this with Matt from LL. Like he was like, do you think this thing can 10,000x? Well, like, yes, I do, but thinking something will 10,000x and then basing decisions on that is objectively bad, like, because it's a low probability, right? It's higher in RH projects, right? He's 1 for 1, right? But we want to look at these things and look at how many things have ever 10,000x, right? So I don't really want to make bets and make plans on 10,000x. What I do see is that I'm so hyper confident that these things can like 10x, right?
Yeah.
And anything that's 10,000x is 10x. So once it's 10x, we'll have some charts, we'll have some data, we'll have seen some staking, we'll got a chance to see like what the communication goes, and you sort of say, okay, now how does that next big breakpoint look? How does the next breakpoint look? And you can, I'm not telling anyone to get panicked at 10x and all of a sudden, flood their bags, but you can look at these things and just see that the probability increases, right? And look at these things and kind of keep, again, reassessing how these things look. And also for a lot of players, and think about how much you put in the sacrifice. I mean, how happy are you at 1,000x, right? Like, if you're up 1,000x, how many of us are going to want to DCA into other things? Like, if you're somebody who's just, an average Joe, and you threw 10 grand in there and you catch 1,000x, like what percentage of your portfolio would now be sitting in one asset, right?
Right.
So you'd already want to make decisions and change these things. So you do absolutely want to be in things that have that tail event, that super, super crazy high upside. But but we don't make bets and life decisions off these very, very small events, right?
Right.
You make smart bets, and the smart bets is like, we can look at the community, the FOMO, the engagement, and say, like, we are stacked for these early, very plus signs and metrics, and you just start to really reevaluate these things as they go. But you still keep in the back of your head that the crypto does weird things. Numbers can get really big.
Yep.
And I've kind of made the joke that I think some of RH's conditioning on telling everyone to hold till 10,000x. Have you ever seen that Jim Carrey movie, Yes Man?
Oh, I did actually, but it was a long time ago, so it's a little fuzzy.
So he has to say yes to everything. So he's just going through everything. But the point isn't to just like stumble through life saying yes, yes, yes. It's to not say no so often, right? So the idea of saying yes to everything is to break you out of a habit. So RH keeps telling you 10,000x. One, he's a bullish guy. I like him, right?
Yep.
But he's also I think in a lot of ways, what he's really telling you is, don't be stupid and sell your whole bag at 20x. That's really the message. So like, if you dangle the 10,000x carrot, you start to remind people like, I can take a little profit and I'll let the bag go up, and I can take a little more profit. And when you see that 100x or that 150 and you're excited, you see your second comma, any of these sort of breakpoints people have in their life, you're about to go buy the slick car. You want to keep in your head that these things can still go up. These things can 10,000x, and that you want to make sure that you still keep some exposure to these things. I think saying to hold till 10,000x is more about breaking out of this, I doubled my money, I'll walk away in the legacy way. It's about holding on, knowing that there's more coming, and making better decisions, not liquidating your whole bag at a low number. We've seen this with Hex, right? There's a lot of guys who made great gains along the way. And, if you go to Hex Trading, they make the most hilarious jokes, giving these guys a hard time. But take profit at 100x, take some profits, be successful with these things. Look at your portfolio when it gets very lopsided with crazy gains. But remember, these things can go up another 100x. They can go up another 1,000x. And to make sure that you keep the percentage chance of those things, and you want to have that exposure. One of those, you can't win the lottery if you don't play, right? So you want to keep some exposure and understand that mentality.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of putting that, the dangling the carrot that Richard's doing. I haven't thought of it quite like that, and what that does psychologically to you. And I think that's such a good thing to wrap your head around. I hadn't thought of that, so that's great. That's a really good point. I got to say thank you for one here to King Gubby Designs, $20. Thanks to both of you guys for what you do for the community. CG, I want a one-on-one with you. Send me an email, my friend, at cryptographics.com. Let's start talking. But thank you guys. And we got 313 people. This is mind-boggling, man. You brought the whole gang with you today, Walrus. Holy moly.
What, guys, it's a work day. What are y'all doing?
Yeah.
Oh, wait a minute. You guys are Hexicans. I forget you guys got a lot of free time.
Yeah, the most free community out there. And speaking, though, of the idea of this 10,000x and saving and keeping your assets together, not getting rid of them, maybe taking small amounts of profits. PulseX seems like we're talking about, it's the beast, it's as far as those single-sided staking pools are concerned. So let's talk about that a little bit and how those are going to work. My understanding is that obviously the PRT token was a placeholder token, and they're going to be sponsored pools, but how do they get sponsored, and how likely is it that we see those sponsored pools happen moment one after the bridge, or is it going to be some time after the bridge that those pools open up?
For sure. Want to know a couple of comments, and I'll answer real quick.
Oh, for sure.
Scott, your boss sucked. You should have fired him. Good job. Benny, I know you're always on a Friday, man. I heard you talk too many times. Every day's Friday for you. And then Damien, the OnlyFans section actually starts in another 17 minutes. So as long as it gets raining, I'll be in the white shirt. Stick around, we got you.
That's why you got the white shirt.
So the sponsor pools are really cool. And I think that there's some neat learning tools. So the way the sponsored pools work is, people already know, again, especially in the Pulse community, airdrops are pretty effective, right? People like free stuff. So if I airdrop the whole Pulse chain sacrifice set, look at what happens, right? So one, probably there's 40,000 people there, right? Let's look at this from like a penetration, like market penetration standpoint, right? How many people are going to think it's a dust attack? All right, there's a chunk.
Right.
How many people literally just do not care and just liquidate whatever it is, or it's not enough that they even bother to engage, right? If I go get C5 the Godwell, if I throw him $70 of something, that guy didn't even hit his brain, right?
No, exactly.
But the point of the airdrop is to freemium onboard people, right? You know, we want people engaged. So if you look at sponsored pools and think about what would it cost me in marketing to get in front of 100,000 wallets who are all participating, not just on the chain, but in the DEX, right? Okay, so that helps, right? You have the DAO proposals, which is the first part of it. So the DAO actually votes on these things, which that voting rights, the governance comes to PulseX. So if you're a PulseX holder, you get to vote on these things.
And quick question on that, if I may, because there's two tabs right now. There's the community tab and the core tab. So where do those proposals start? Does it go from community and then migrates to core, or does it start in the core proposal section?
I'll need to double check on that.
Okay.
I haven't seen what those guys have done yet, and they still might tweak that interface a little bit there too.
Right.
Yeah, Ag and all those PulseX devs, man, you guys are savages. It's so good. The trustless buy and burn is so good. I've said this a ton of times, again, back to that, you know, that I don't have the same, you know, anywhere close to these dev experience that these guys do. But the more that I like sort of like bite into one mechanic, like I just realize like how good these guys are and how advanced and unbelievably talented they are, and like why the smartest people are still so bullish on these things.
Right.
So as far as the DAO, they write up a proposal, and for people that want good examples of these, you can look at Spooky Swap and look at their DAO proposals. Pancake does as well.
Walrus, can I interrupt you for a second?
Are a little closer to Spooky, so.
You cut out just for a quick second there, and we missed something important. So just before you got to Spooky Swap, what were you saying?
For people that want an example on what these proposals look like and what you'll see in them, right. You can look at the Spooky Swap DAO proposals. They have good examples. I posted a few on my Twitter before. But essentially so they vote on the DAO, and then they become a pool, and they'll have, you know, this is the Walrus token, XYZ. I'm going to start it at this block. I'm going to run it for a month. It'll end at this block. Project does X, Y, and Z. So they would put it out there, again, the same reason you do an airdrop or freemium onboard, all these kind of things. So where this proposal makes a lot more sense than those others is if people do anything, they're more likely to stay engaged, right? It's stickiness, right? So you had to read the DAO. Okay, there's one thing. So if you read the DAO, and I maybe, you know, it's my window this big to say something interesting, right? You know, yield that's never been seen before, right? Oh, all right. Well, I like yield. Maybe I'll check this out, right? He looks into these things, and then the same thing with the staking pool. So if somebody has to read the DAO, doesn't necessarily have to, but if people read the DAO, they get triggered, they read things on there, and then if they have to actually select the pool, all these are metrics that make it stickier and more likely that someone ends up participating. So for the sponsors, this is great marketing. It's a more sticky airdrop. It's the people that are most likely to use it. They have to engage more than with an airdrop. It gives them a chance to kind of speak their case. So it makes a lot of sense for them. For us, it's free yield. If you like their stuff, great. You found a token, you got it for free. You got a chance to talk to the community. If you don't, you sell it. Now, the other thing about this that's specifically cool, Volt, appreciate you, brother.
Yep. Thank you, Volt. Appreciate you, man. You're amazing.
And then Bob said that Keyboard couldn't get a super chat. Keyboard, brother, if you have a question, man, just tag it in there one more time, and we'll make sure we get to it for you. Why it's cool that these are third-party tokens as well is if, let's say that this PulseX single-sided staking pool gave you Pulse. Well, people would be happy, but then people who want to take profit have to sell down Pulse. I don't want you to sell down my tickers. I want you to sell down somebody else's ticker. So if you get yield and you want Hex or PulseX or Pulse, cool. Dump their tokens, eat their liquidity, and come buy our stuff. If you don't and you want to take profit, cool. Dump their stuff, not our stuff, right? So this third-party pool essentially gives us, essentially we're letting everyone else pay to play and giving us an opportunity to get yield, possibly find new projects, have extra means to sort of vet these within the community. And for those guys, it's very inexpensive relative to that level of engagement and marketing with the community. So it makes a lot of sense.
Right. I like that. So when it comes to these pools, I guess, how much, like, because when we saw in the APR, obviously the test net was not even close to anything sort of realistic for any kind of representation we might get.
Test and test net.
Exactly. It's not what we're going to see. But what is going to, because the one thing I was having trouble understanding was I would assume there'd be some kind of correlation to what was going in the pools and the increase and decrease in APR. But what I found, and maybe you found the same thing, is even though the supply in the specific pool, or the one pool obviously, wasn't moving a whole hell of a lot, the fluctuations in the APR were very dynamic, very dynamic. So what actually causes that movement in APR in the pools?
So obviously you have how those rewards are being distributed on the one side, right? Which is how many
Yep.
participants. The other is it. So like Hex right now, why would anyone here like need to sponsor a pool for Hex? Hex is
Right.
fantastic. It's great, right? Brought
Mhm.
everyone to the party. You got Benny's Every Day's Friday. Why would I need to? I don't need to buy your exposure to this thing, right?
Mhm.
So most of these are new projects. So they're going to be smaller liquidity pools. They're going to be very volatile, and that
Mhm.
APR is going to sit here and slingshot around with their price.
So it's okay. So it's correlated directly to the price.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yep. Okay. That makes a lot of sense then. So we'll see some really interesting APRs then, depending on which tokens, and we could see some very wide swings. And do you think that, I mean, this is really speculative, but is the timing always going to be the beginning of that pool is going to be the best time to get in, or how would someone, know to, when they're watching pools, know that it's a good time to get in the beginning, or does it make more sense to get in at the end or in the middle kind of thing? How does someone gauge it for maximizing it?
So it's a speculative chart thing in the first place. I would think that in general, you'd almost probably want to front run the pool a little bit. If I'm just sort of speculating, we could look at Spooky Swap and Pancake Swap for the people that like really really want to have a good handle on this early. But I think we'll get to sort of see a bit of like a game of chicken where people want to get out early, dump before everyone else versus acquiring a lot.
Right.
So and again, this would almost be case by case, right? Like if this thing is called, cat dog token 123, I'm probably, I'm going to be aggressive on that and get my 20, $30 or whatever the thing's worth. If
Yep.
it's, let's say, for example, what's another one of the projects? Like, let's say like Hurricash or L, like one of these projects that we're like, okay, they've got some connection to the community. It's really valuable. Let's say it was Hedron, right? Let's say that Hedron launched natively on PulseChain. We read this. We saw all the work that Alex had done. We see that there's a drop going on to hexagons. It's like, hold on, this has got something to it. That might be something where maybe I just say, hey, I'm not gonna. Maybe I participate, but maybe I'll let this pool and let everyone else get out and see if that thing picks up and decide to sell later on. So I think it's a bit of a moving target. I think in general, just if I had to pick one, I would probably want to front run the very end of the pool and let lazy people wait till the pool's end and then hit the button. And then the more connection, more vibe I feel in the project, I might be willing to hold out later, give it another couple weeks, see if that pool rebounds and takes off at all.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I like that a lot. And I have another question, but before we go, we got to stop and say, holy crap, Hex 19, the 50 bomb.
The
My
man,
God,
the myth,
you guys.
the legend.
Hex 19 in the chat. Thank you so much, my friend. Great interview with Walrus. Thanks, guys. Can't wait for PulseChain launch. Man, you, me, and I think everyone in here. I cannot wait. And I cannot say thank you enough. And I cannot say thank you enough to everybody in here. We got 312 people watching this right now. This is amazing.
And for people that don't know, Hex 19 is an absolute legend in the community. I've been fortunate enough to be able to get a chance to shake his hand in person. Him and his family are incredible. They are Hexagon to the core. There'll be cool stuff that people don't even know that they've thought of and tried to handle on the back end that will likely never be public, but they are incredible. And I promise they care about you guys. That family's fantastic. I can't say enough about him.
Amazing. I really can't wait to meet. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to make it to PulseCon, but if I can, I am so excited to meet everyone in this community. It's just crazy to me how many cool and amazing people there are. I mean, it's mind-boggling that we found this little pocket of people all in one place. It's so cool.
So incredible. Incredible.
I don't know if I can remember my question. It was something to do with the pulse, the pools, but that threw me off. The super chat threw me off here. So I mean,
Hex 19 dropped the mic on us.
You just dropped the mic on us there. Thank you for that, Hex 19. That was a good mic, a good mic drop. But I guess a final question that we get, because we're getting close to about the 1.5 hour mark here, and I do want to open up to talk about things that you're working on quickly, a little more in depth. But one final thing would be like, what strategies or what specific things are you doing, if anything, pre-bridge and post-bridge to maximize like your portfolio? Is there a specific strategy you are taking?
There's a few things that I'll do. A lot of it is, it's not much, honestly. It's very boring. I think because the game theory discussion, like they think I've got like a whiteboard and all. It'll be very, very simple. And myself. So
I think we lost you there for a second, Walrus, and we missed you there for about 15 seconds. Yeah. You're back.
Oh, okay. So as far as what I plan on doing, what I plan on doing is it'll be very, very simple. Mostly it'll just be if the market begs me to do something, right? If I see a ratio on something get way, way out of hand, okay, then maybe I'll DCA in one way or the other. Sorry about the connection, guys. A little stormy here in South Austin. There's again, if the ratio gets really out of hand, I'll take advantage of that. I'll be moving in my copies, taking advantage of a few of those things. But for the most part, in general, what I say when people ask me is, I don't care which of these things goes up because I'm not selling you any of my stuff. I care about which one goes down. I care about which one the market tells me is inexpensive. Where is it telling me to buy?
Right.
Because all this thing about to me is accumulation. So if PulseX 100X's, cool. Yeah. All right. I'm going to take some profit later on. But all it really means is that I'm going to accumulate the other ones. Right. So this is all about just bringing in value, guys. Like don't count your chickens, keep adding the eggs, keep adding these things. Look for what's inexpensive. I'm just going to keep accumulating. It's all about just getting a hold of these things and letting number go up.
I love the language you're using there, but inexpensive. You're not even saying buy the dip. You're saying inexpensive. That implies like what its value is going to, and you see a dip and you see opportunity. And I think that's important for everyone else to understand as well. Like the dip is an opportunity and not something where you have to scream and cry, oh God, it's all over. That's screaming opportunity, And so I think that what's really cool is I hear a lot of that language. And for me, what that means, and I'd love to know what you think too, is that implies that we're kind of projecting where things are going to go and almost forecasting on a collective basis of where we all know. And for me, that means like maybe we don't get the 10,000x, but it wants to go there. And we might not get there. Maybe we do, but the projection is going to help us go close to that, at some point, whether it takes 2, 3, 4, 5 years. We all want that, and we are holding, which means less liquidity goes into liquidity pools, and we all know what that means,
Yeah, and it's I also use those things too because I'm just not a chart guy. Sometimes I don't even know what the price is on these things. That's not where my skill set is, and like I said, I like to play a little better games. So I really resonate with RH's mentality about like trading is just taking money from someone else's pocket. I've done a lot of sales. I've ran businesses. I've always been one that can capture margin. And again, I've said this up before. I want to be plus EV, plus expected value, everywhere. I don't want to have to crush a few people so that I can build myself up. And that's why I like to participate in the community the way I am. I just try to do the best I can to add value. I'll hold things I think are valuable until the number is high, and then I'll take some profit and live my life with them. So I'm not a chart guy. It's not where my expertise is. It's not what I find that engaging. So I try to look at just sort of not utility necessarily, but the metrics. Do these things look positive? Like you said, is it aimed at 10,000x? All right. If it's just aimed there, that's good enough for me. If it's a good game, there's a community, there's value. We're trying to add things to it. That's a good enough game for me.
Yep. I agree. I could not agree more. And I want to say a quick shout out again to Volt for the super chat earlier. And this is a cool comment. Watch thousands of crypto videos, and I have learned more in this video than others. Priceless info will be rewatching. Thank you, Volt.
Very cool.
That's very, very cool. And so I think that'll be a great time. So first off, what other projects are you working on, and where can people find that?
Sure. And I'm getting a little low on battery here, and the connection's getting shaky. The storm's blowing in here. So if I dip out, guys, I've absolutely enjoyed it. Sorry about that. So the big things we've been doing is working a lot with the community as far as education. Obviously, Hex does a ton of onboarding. We do a lot of outbound marketing on things like airdrop.io. And guys, the team behind me at How to Pulse, man, they're so incredible. They do everything. They participate everywhere. One of our devs is an admin in the Pulse dev room. One of our devs is the one who actually designed my Walrus. Like, he's a dev, and we're building an NFT marketplace, NFT on Pulse, which is what we're really trying to add a lot of value to on Pulse. The same dev who built the NFT marketplace literally built my Walrus. Like, it's a group of very creatives.
Wow.
they work on, I mean, they do things like SEO. We've got LJ who always keeps us right. He's, kind of our in-house counsel. We have a team that just does amazing stuff. Che Money, everyone knows him. He's out here in front, preaching the good word, helping with security. Him and, Papa B have probably saved more people's money than anyone can count.
Oh my God, yeah.
I think Trezor probably owes them at least a 20% share of that whole company for how much work those guys put in for them. So we're always just working for the community, trying to fight fires, doing streams and content like that stuff. We almost never take the value out of that. Almost everything people have spent time with me one-on-one and been like, man, I'll pay for your time. I pretty much just always tell them, no, just donate to the How To Pulse address. Let us go pump everybody else's bags. Then we have, NFT on Pulse. So if you look at the communities that should get the most out of PulseChain, besides everyone that got in, is people who use DEXs and people who mint NFTs, right? So this community is very heavy in these projects. They've, Hexagons use Uniswap in these DEXs, and we airdrop those coins. So then the other piece of that puzzle is NFTs. So we really want to bring those in. Our marketplace is very creator forward. We have some very cool features added. We're actually going to wait till after the launch. We kept debating, and we just were not going to remove ourselves from the things we're doing in the community, and we just couldn't take the copies. We thought about it a lot. We really played. It's not a knock. There are projects I'm very fond of that decided to. That's their own tokenomics. A lot of these guys did. It's not a picking and choosing. It's just when it came down to it, that's just not where we landed. So we're going to launch after mainnet. We wanted to be around and take care of these things. Our timeline kept getting pushed back with working with compromised wallets, to go into the PulseX sacrifice room, all these things. So the community just took precedent, but it's incredible. I'm really, really excited to make sure you guys get a chance to see it. It's very, very cool. It's tweaks that make it really powerful and focused on creators. And it means a lot. Like I said, our devs are guys doing artwork. They're musicians. They're people who do this code because they enjoy it. They bring in people like myself that are just, just exuberant. We love the community. And now this community has a closer tie when they've seen like things like HSI stakes. And I think that the NFT market is very immature. It's young. But I think if we build better marketplaces on better chains, they're closer to better stores of value. They get to come in here and listen to the things our community brings. We can be some of the things that spur on that innovation and that maturity and see these things grow. I mean, think HSI stakes, that's got to be one of the best things that NFTs have done to date. And it came from Alex and that great team trying to add something better to Hex and this community, and it spurred on great innovation. And I hope to continue that. So again, when I talk about projects, I'm almost always talking about the protocols and the tech, in it for the tech. So those guys are incredible. And I think that's what we can see. When this community touches things, they get better. We built things on top of Hex. RH built Hex. The projects on here are very much in RH's image in a lot of ways. The network's better. PulseX is better. We hope that our NFT marketplace will be better and help spur on the things that this community cares about and echoes. They're all ripples in the same pond. We're just trying to build and add value.
That's amazing. That's amazing how much you guys are doing. And I would love at some point, it'd be really cool because, I haven't really on this channel talked much about NFTs, but I think it's one thing that really needs to be talked about because it's going to be here and we need to embrace it. And we need to make sure that we embrace those people because it's such a large part of the ecosystem on Ethereum, So I know today we're not going to be able to get into that, but maybe in a future stream we come on and we go deep dive and with maybe a couple of us, because there's maybe like Steak and Apes. There's who else is involved in NFT. There's tons of guys. In the NFT
we can
world.
grab some of we'll grab some of the NFT communities that are artists that understand that side of it. And I can probably grab some of the dev team and we can get a little nitty gritty and a little cool stuff and talk about funny apes and all kinds of cool stuff.
I love it. Okay, let's plan to do that. So where can people find you though, Walter? Where's the best place for people to connect with you if they want to get in contact with you or communicate with you?
Yeah. I'm very, very accessible. It's really easy. I'm on Twitter, mostly just to put out information. I'll hop into spaces occasionally. Our people in those spaces, including graphics, and then Telegram primarily a lot there. So you can reach me through the How To Pulse site. We, all of us answer there. We do a lot of the content. We keep growing that blog and the education there. So How To Pulse, the Walrus Twitter there, or on Telegram. I'm happy to interact, help, ask questions. If anyone's building cool stuff and needs help, they're going to build it on PulseChain, get with me. If you're trying to onboard people, get with me. If you need education, get with me. If you're doing something that's adding value to the community, I will do everything I personally can to help, and so will the How To Pulse team.
Amazing, amazing, amazing. So I have your Twitter link in the description here, but if you could send me in the maybe even in the private chat your links if you're for like Telegram or wherever else people can find you, I'll put that into the rest of the description there so people can find you. And also we should talk at some point here about, we got a little cooking up a little something that I need to talk to you about as well. I'll say this on stream to get everyone, you know, wondering what's going on, but it might be something cool. So we'll talk. We're going to talk here. So wow,
very cool.
What an amazing stream. This has been so good. I've learned so much. Chat, how much have you guys learned? This has been crazy. So Walrus,
yeah, this is a really great chat, guys. I've only a couple of streams since like November. I am no shade of an influencer. Anything else other than talk to you guys. So this is it. This is, you know, again, I just like talking to the community and being helpful. So having this much response on the chats and the view counts, and again, the gratitude is it's breathtaking, guys. I'm telling you guys, I get beautiful messages, and man, I love this community. I love you guys. I really, really appreciate it. You guys, the gratitude you guys have like championed me to grow and keep learning new things and keep pressing. So it's definitely very reciprocal. I just really cannot be grateful enough.
I couldn't relay that sentiment equally as enough back to you and back to the chat. It's crazy. It really is. So Walrus, thank you so much for being on. We're going to talk very soon. And
very cool, brother.
I can't wait for the next one. This has been amazing. So thank you so much, my friend.
Arnold, I saw you just slipped into the last super chat there. So again, I want to make sure you got a shout out. Thanks very much, brother. Appreciate y'all funding great content creators. You know, again, we'll be in the space. We're going to keep building and adding things. Cats like graphics are hyper important. Most people do not understand or even care about some of the things we talked about today, but they'll listen to guys like this. So when they put out things that are interesting and engaging, that's where the value is, right? Like promote these guys, help them get big, help them have a strong audience. It'll pump your bags. I appreciate you saying that. And I appreciate you all being here. I appreciate Arnold Block for the $9.99. You're the man. Best stream yet, Cryptographics. Thank you, Walsh, for all you. This was. I feel like these streams getting better and better and better. I don't know. It's crazy how it's going. So amazing. Very cool. So guys, thank you all so much for being here. What an amazing stream. I hope you guys continue to have a great night. If you haven't already, go and smash that like button, smash the big red subscribe button. I'm also doing, and this is the only thing I'm going to talk about here, I have a current pre-order for PulseChain and PulseX soccer jerseys, which there may be a PulseCon soccer game if we can organize that if you have a jersey, you'll automatically be on a team. But you can go to cryptographics.com. I'm not going to say anymore. Go there, check it out. If you want it, cool. If you don't want it, all good. That's all I'm going to say, guys. Thank you so much for being here. Have a great rest of your night. We'll talk to you guys very soon. Peace.